Tangihia o tātou tini mate. Haere, haere, haere. Tātou kua mahue nei. Kia ora tātou katoa i ngā āhuatanga o te wā. Ai o ki te rangi, ai o ki te whenua. Ai o ki ngā mana, ki ngā reo, ki ngā iwi katoa. E te kāwana tianara o Aotearoa, kahurangi Cindy Kiro, tēnā koe. Ki ngā kai kōrero, Minita Tinetti, Ranjna Patel, Sophie Handford. He mihi nui tēnei kia koutou, tēnā rawa atu koutou. Kia koutou kua huia ipurangi nei ki te tautoko i tēnei kaupapa, whakahirahira, arā te rā whakanui i ngā wāhine, nau mai, haere mai. Ko ai au, no Hāmoa, no whiti o Kutipuna, ko tupe Solomon Tanoa i tōku ingoa, ko au te kaiwhakahaere o te ata nei. Tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa. Good morning everyone and warm greetings to our distinguished speakers, Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Dame Cindy Kiro, Governor-General of New Zealand, the Honourable Jan Tinetti, and our keynote speakers, Sophie Handford and Ranjna Patel. Welcome to those who are joining us from throughout Aotearoa, New Zealand, and a warm welcome to our friends joining us from across the Pacific. Talofa lava malole soifua maua malelangi e mama. Kia ora na koutou katoa toa, maloe lele, whakalofa lahi atu, ni sambola maloni. My name is Tupe Solomon Tanawai and I have the privilege of being your MC. The theme for today's event is Changing Climates, Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. Leaders of Pacific nations, including New Zealand, have been saying for a few years now that climate change remains the single greatest threat to the livelihoods, security, and well-being of the peoples of the Pacific. I'm looking forward to the contribution our speakers will make to this conversation. We are very fortunate to have an exciting lineup of speakers at this event, which is proudly brought to you jointly by UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand and the Zonta Club of Wellington. I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage all those who are joining the live stream to post a photo of their group online with the hashtags Zonta Club of Wellington, hashtag UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand, and hashtag IWD 2022. I now welcome Belinda Hemiona to start this occasion with a karakia. Belinda is a member of Zonta and is proudly of Ngāti Apa descent.
Atamari e whānau, kia ora wahine toa, ngā mihi nui ki a koe tupe, mō tō mihi. I have the pleasure of opening today settling us into our celebration with a karakia timatanga. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atākura. He hio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. Kia ora.
Kia ora Belinda, and thank you for starting this event with a blessing. I now call upon Anna Jackson, President of the Zonta Club of Wellington, to give her opening address.
Kia ora koutou katoa, na mihi nui ki e koutou, ko Anna Jackson tuku ingoa. Nau mai, haere mai. A very warm welcome everyone to our celebration of International Women's Day 2022. Wellington Club of Zonta is delighted to bring you this event today, together with UN Women Aotearoa. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the unprecedented and challenging times we find ourselves in today. Where we would normally be gathered together at Parliament, we are instead coming together virtually from our socially distanced bubbles as we live and work in different ways in response to this global pandemic. And of course, since this is International Women's Day, I must acknowledge what is happening in Ukraine and the increased risk for women and children. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the women and the burdens they will be bearing for a long time. I am therefore even more appreciative that we can celebrate. It is powerful that we are all here today, that we have all chosen to take this time to recognise the contribution of women and girls around the world who are leading the change on climate change adaptation, mitigation and response to building a more sustainable future for all. I'd like to welcome our sensational lineup of speakers and thank you for joining us on this very special day. It is fitting that today is also Zonta Rose Day, encouraging us to recognise the efforts of local individuals to help change the status of women and girls throughout our community and the world. So what is Zonta? Zonta stands for women's rights. We are part of a leading global organisation of professionals empowering women worldwide through service and advocacy. There are 1,125 clubs globally in Zonta International, with a membership of over 25,000 in 67 countries. New Zealand has 28 clubs. Members of Zonta envisage a world in which women's rights are recognised as human rights and every woman is able to achieve her full potential. Also, that women have access to all resources and are represented in decision-making positions on an equal basis with men. Significantly, we visualise a world where no woman lives in fear of violence. Zontians at international, national and club level advocate for gender equality, to end gender-based violence and look to expand opportunities for women and girls through our education programs and service projects. The Zonta Club of Wellington has over 50 members. We are currently supporting Grandparents Raising Grandchildren Trust New Zealand, Shakti Domestic Violence Intervention and Prevention for Refugee and Migrant Women, and the Hutt Valley Teen Parent School. We promote and support education by providing scholarships and awards. Our Young Women in Public Affairs Award recognises a Year 13 woman who is active in her community and is about to set off on her career. We are active in the advocacy space, committed to making this world a better place for women and girls. Our club believes that New Zealand needs more women in science. We've established the Zonta Science Award, a national award for women with PhDs who are early in their career. 16 emerging women scientists have received this award. Dr. Helen Woolner from Victoria University is the current recipient. We welcome new members. To find out more, please go to our website or find us on social media. Together, we can make this world a better place for women and girls. Tēnā koe, me te hakinekine e te kōrero. Thank you and enjoy the talks.
Thank you, Anna, for those words of welcome and for making us all aware of the incredible work that Zonta is doing. I would like to acknowledge the Honourable Jan Tinetti, Minister for Women, for his support of today's event. We look forward to hearing from the Minister later this morning. And thank you to all those who have posted online already. A special hello and good morning to the Members of Parliament joining us online, including Sarah Pallett, MP for Elam, Nicola Willis, Deputy Leader of the National Party, Jan Logie, List MP for the Greens, and Brooke Van Velden, Deputy Leader for ACT. Also joining us this morning is the Equal Employment Opportunities Commissioner, Saunoa Mali'i Karanina Sumeo. We also have several diplomatic missions, including the Embassy of the Argentine Republic, the Cook Islands High Commission, the Canadian High Commission, the Embassy of the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Delegation of the European Union, the High Commission of Malaysia, the Embassy of the Republic of Turkey, and the US Embassy. Also joining us are several schools, including John Paul College, Sacred Heart College, and Samuel Marsden Collegiate. Morena koutou to women from all across the public and private sectors, as well as community groups including Taumata Tiro Tiro, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei Trust, Māori Women's Development, Pacific Women's Watch NZ, Pacifica in Auckland, Counties and Invercargill, the Tongan Women's Council of Aotearoa, the Taiwanese Women's Association of New Zealand, Hamilton Multicultural Services Trust, Rural Women NZ, Soroptimist International Taupo, Methodist Women's Fellowship NZ, Global Women New Zealand Breakthrough Leaders Cohort of 2021, Social Services Providers of Aotearoa, Martin Hautis Foundation Trust, and Men's Health Trust NZ. What a wonderful, diverse range of people we have tuning in today. Please continue to post with the hashtags that you see here. It is now my honour to introduce our first speaker, Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Dame Cindy Kiro, Governor-General of New Zealand. Dame Cindy is the first Māori woman to be appointed as Governor-General. She is of Ngāpuhi, Ngāti Hine, Ngāti Kahu, and British descent. Dame Cindy was appointed as a Dame Companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to child wellbeing and education on the New Year 2021 Honours List. Prior to taking up her role as Governor-General, Dame Cindy was Chief Executive of the Royal Society, Te Aparangi. Dame Cindy has sent her message for International Women's Day via pre-recorded speech.
Nau mai hara mai ki te hui nei, kia tautoko te kaupapa o te rā. Earlier this year, I visited our nation's marae at Waitangi for the first time as Governor-General. It was a momentous and moving occasion for me on very many levels. As I walked alongside the Prime Minister and the Chief Justice onto the marae, I reflected that this was the first time that the holders of these three offices of state had been welcomed onto the marae together at Waitangi, a place that is at the heart of who we are as a nation and the principles we stand for. In 2022, all three of these office holders are women. This is affirmation, if any were needed, that we are indeed living in the time of Māori kura, a time when women leaders bring us skills of communication, negotiation, and conciliation to the issues of the day. So I welcome this opportunity today to speak to women whose kaupapa is to empower other women in this time of Māori kura, so that they too can achieve their potential and contribute. The UN theme for this International Women's Day, Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow, connects two significant priorities in the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and in the Commonwealth Charter. Clearly, there is much work to do in nations where women do not have access to education, training, work, or an income, and where they can't contribute to decision-making around sustainable use of land and resources. In nations where gender equality is being progressed, there tends to be a stronger focus on sustainability, and where there are more female parliamentarians, environment treaties are more likely to be ratified. The women and men who made New Zealand the first nation in the world to give women the right to vote would be proud to see the strong female representation in our parliament today. New Zealand is on the way to achieving gender equality, but progress is slower than we would like it to be, especially when it comes to addressing discrimination against women from ethnic communities. We still have progress to make on pay equity and female representation on boards. We all yearn to see a sharp decline in the statistics around domestic violence. And I'd like to think that one day soon, female leadership will no longer be noteworthy. Do women bring particular qualities to leadership? In the 1990s, researchers concluded that women have a greater tendency to be pro-social, altruistic, and empathetic. We could argue about whether those qualities are innate or socialised, but they could explain why women have taken a leading role in promoting environmental causes and sustainability, both here and internationally. If I were to ask you to name the global activists in this sphere, I'm sure Greta Thunberg, Jane Goodall would spring to mind alongside Sir David Attenborough. While it's wonderful that women have taken the opportunity to lead the charge on sustainability, effective and lasting change requires the commitment of every part of our society. Fortunately, A generational change is afoot. Amongst millennials and Generation Z, sustainability is not so now much regarded as being women's work. The momentum is building, with our business sector understanding that there is no economy without an environment to sustain it, with communities banding together to restore habitats, and with our young people pressing for urgent change. During my term as Governor-General, I will promote kaitiakitanga of our whenua, our awa and moana. I will promote science and evidence-based research that enables us to better understand our world and the impact of our actions. The chances for getting broad societal change are so much better when there is a consensus across sectors. That is why I will call to support the Aotearoa Circle that brings together senior leaders in science and academia, business, government agencies, iwi Māori, NGOs and local government to address fundamental sustainability, focusing on energy, water, biodiversity, management of fish stocks, soil, oil production and distribution and transport, as well as funding streams for sustainable initiatives. As Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth's representative in New Zealand, I will also support and encourage further the Queen's Commonwealth Canopy, a network of covenanted Indigenous forests on private land across Aotearoa that protects our precious flora and fauna. In this Platinum Jubilee year of Her Majesty's reign, as we enter our third year of a pandemic, we do well to be inspired by Queen Elizabeth's constancy, her fortitude and service over 70 years. I can personally attest to Her Majesty's ability at the age of 95 to adapt to changing times. In my case, with her traditional audience with an incoming Governor-General, which had to be by Zoom, needless to say, her warmth, presence and grace were undiminished. While there's no real substitute for face-to-face communication, we can be grateful that such technology has enabled us all to stay connected and to stay safer during the pandemic. New Zealanders can take enormous pride in our response to the pandemic and our extraordinarily high vaccination rates. This is not to deny or downplay the pressures that we have witnessed on the social fabric of our communities. Looking ahead, our challenge will be to rebuild our social contract, our tātou pounamu, a greenstone door to peace, reconciliation and healing. It will require effort, commitment and cooperation to build a resilient accord that is inclusive of everyone who's chosen to make Aotearoa their home. But do it we must if we are to meet the challenges that face us now and also into the future. Together, the women of Aotearoa New Zealand can bring their leadership to this process, inspired by the wisdom of the wonderful women who have gone before us, and energised by the passion and determination of young wahine who lead us into the future. I wish you all every success as you play your part in our quest for a better future for women, for Aotearoa and for the planet.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the Right Honourable Dame Cindy Kiro, Governor-General of New Zealand. Would now like to take a moment to congratulate all of our newly appointed dames for the last year. We acknowledge each of them for their service to New Zealand. Our next speaker is the Honourable Jan Tinetti. Over her 20-year career in education, she has fiercely advocated at a national level for equal educational opportunities, and she is currently the Minister of Internal Affairs, Minister for Women, and Associate Minister of Education. I now invite the Honourable Jan Tinetti to say a few words.
Tēnā koutou katoa, nei te mihi mai aha ki a tātou katoa e te huitahi nei I tēnei rā. Thank you for the opportunity to celebrate International Women's Day with you. And I think last year I said I'm looking forward to hopefully this year that we would be able to do it in person. But hey, here we are. And how lucky are we that we can join together even virtually to celebrate such an auspicious day. And thank you, Tupe, for your introduction and your work towards making this event a success. I'd also like to acknowledge the Zonta International Club of Wellington and UN Women Aotearoa for organising this online occasion and not letting this pandemic get the better of us, that we can still come together. Special thanks to your representatives, Zonta Club of Wellington President Anna Jackson, who welcomed us this morning, Zonta Governor for New Zealand Desiree Kirby, Zonta Global Director Suella Cumming, and UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand President Tara Singh. I sincerely thank you and your organisations for your contributions to your communities in advancing the status of women in New Zealand and internationally. And I extend a warm welcome to my parliamentary colleagues who have joined us online today. Look, the past year has been a difficult one for Aotearoa. The past 2 years have been a difficult one for Aotearoa. But we have much to be proud of when we look back on the achievements of our women and wahine toa. We acknowledge women like sporting stars, Dames Lisa Carrington and Sophie Pascoe, the Black Ferns and Zoe Zadowski-Sinnott, who soared to Olympic glory, and our scientists, last year's speaker here, such as 2021 New Zealand of the Year, Dr. Susie Wiles, who has been at the forefront of our COVID response. And I'd like to pay tribute to the thousands of women, vaccinators, testers, workers at the borders, in our hospitals, our iwi and community service providers, supermarket workers and cleaners, and many, many other women who have continued to help us get through the pandemic. You are our unsung heroes who keep our communities and whānau safe and strong. I'd also like to acknowledge the achievements of our speakers, led by Her Excellency, Dame Cindy Kiro. Last year, she was appointed our first wahine Māori Governor-General after a lifetime of service to improve our nation's health, education and social wellbeing. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from our speakers here this morning, climate activist and counsellor, and someone I admire greatly, Sophie Handford. This year, International Women's Day recognises women like Sophie who lead the charge on climate change. And we also celebrate the achievements of Ranjna Patel, who has been named New Zealand Innovator of the Year in 2021 for her amazing mahi in business and in the community. There have also been advances for women that we can be proud of. In 2021, we reached the government's target of over 50% of women on public sector boards and committees. In 2020, the Equal Pay Amendment Act further enshrined pay equity into legislation. Pay equity settlements have contributed to the closing of the public service gender pay gap, and at 8.6%, it's the lowest since measurement of the pay gap began in 2000, although I keep saying that while there's a pay gap, there is more work to be done. And as a former school principal, I'm particularly proud of the introduction of free period products in schools and kura. No young women or girls should have their education affected by period poverty. These steps towards achieving equality for women are now more important than ever. As the theme for International Women's Day this year suggests, gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. The theme reflects the increasing recognition that women are more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change than men. Across the world, women are more likely to be among society's poorest and most dependent on natural resources which are threatened by climate change. It is critical we further improve the position of women, both at home and abroad, to ensure a sustainable future for them and for the families and communities that depend on them. But like many of you, I'm also thinking about the women in the Ukraine and also in Russia. We know that wars have a huge impact on women, and what we can do from Aotearoa to support these women is of the utmost concern to me. This government has ambitious plans to progress gender equality for women and wahine in Aotearoa, New Zealand, so we can be more resilient in the future. We're learning lessons from the COVID pandemic, which has shown how women are impacted by economic shocks to a greater degree than our male counterparts. Large numbers of women work in sectors that have been hard hit by the pandemic, including tourism, hospitality, retail and accommodation. We've sought to alleviate this through initiatives including wage subsidies and training and educational opportunities. And we've also created the COVID-19 Community Fund, which allocated $2 million that helped 160 organisations to support women affected by the pandemic. It was such a powerful experience for me visiting one of the recipients of the Community Fund and seeing the vital work being done for women by women. We want to enhance the economic security of women so they can better withstand the impacts of events such as pandemics or climate change. So we are developing the Women's Employment Action Plan that will address barriers and challenges that disadvantage women in the workplace. These barriers include discrimination, harassment, unequal burdens of unpaid work, underemployment, and the clustering of women in traditional and often low-paid sectors. The plan acknowledges wahine Māori and women of Pacific and ethnic communities are particularly deeply affected by these challenges and seeks to find solutions that work for them. We are identifying steps that will support women to gain and retain decent work that earns a decent wage, so they have choices and can fulfil their potential. The plan will provide a way forward, acknowledging the challenges and identifying the ways to overcome them. We're also doing more to address gender pay imbalances or pay gaps. We're building on the Public Service Gender Pay Gap Action Plan and pay equity settlements, which are already helping to close the gap for women. We've launched Kia Toi Poto, a new public service action plan that will go deeper to also address Māori, Pacific and ethnic pay gaps. It focuses on pay transparency, equitable salaries, career and leadership development, eliminating bias and discrimination, and flexible work by default as key milestones that will help to further close pay gaps. Climate change is expected to impact Indigenous women, particularly severely and globally. An important goal for this government is improving outcomes and helping to achieve equality for wahine Māori, so they, their whānau and iwi can look forward to a sustainable future. And to do that, we need to acknowledge and address the injustices of the past. The Ministry for Women hosts the joint ropu, which together with Te Puni Kokari supports the Crown's involvement in the Mana Wahine Waitangi Tribunal Kaupapa Inquiry. The inquiry is considering alleged Treaty of Waitangi breaches, which have damaged the customary roles wahine Māori held prior to colonisation. This loss of recognition of rangatiratanga has had serious consequences for the social, economic, cultural and spiritual well-being of wahine Māori and their access to leadership roles. These consequences are still being felt by wahine Māori today in areas as wide-ranging as education, employment, resource management, housing and justice. The joint ropu will lead the Crown's response to those issues by working closely with other government agencies to work towards addressing these inequities experienced by wahine. Rising uncertainty and stress caused by the impact of climate change could also lead to an increase in gender-based violence, and we are committed to a plan to keep women and children safe from violence. Last year, Minister Davidson launched Te Ārerikara, the national strategy to eliminate family violence and sexual violence. This acknowledges the need to rebalance efforts towards prevention to support intergenerational change. Strategies to achieve that change include mobilising communities, ensuring we have a skilled and culturally competent workforce, and investing in primary prevention. I'm hopeful this plan will lead to significant change so far fewer women and their families experience the pain and devastation of family and sexual violence. And on the world stage, we have committed to playing our part in combating climate change. We've increased our climate finance commitment to $1.3 billion, a fourfold increase in the climate aid we provide to the Pacific and other lower income countries. We've also set a more ambitious goal to reduce our emissions by 50% by 2030. At COP26, we joined the Women Leading on Climate Coalition and signed up to the Glasgow Women's Leadership Statement, calling for countries to further support women and girls to lead in addressing climate change. Within our international development cooperation, we target at least 4% of funding to programs that have gender equality as the main objective. And while women are disproportionately affected by climate change, they are also a powerful force for change. And that's why we support climate action that promotes equality and the empowerment of women. And later this month, we will meet with our international colleagues to discuss gender equality and women's empowerment in the context of climate change, environmental and disaster risk reduction at the 66th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. The Ministry for Women is also working with the National Council of Women on a discussion paper on the impact of climate change on women to help develop policy and identify potential actions. And just before I finish, there is another important that I want to acknowledge before I finish here, and that is our Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern. The reason that I want to acknowledge our Prime Minister this morning, that recently, like many of you, I've been very shocked by the use of misogynistic language directed towards her. And for me, it served as a reminder of how much work we still have to do. We have made big gains, but there is a lot of work in front of us. How too many people have attitudes which will only be shifted by our ongoing efforts together. On International Women's Day and every day, let's work together to build a more equitable and sustainable future for all our women and girls. Finally, I'd like to once again thank our organisers and our speakers today. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Minister, thank you once again for your support of this event and the work that you have been doing to empower all women in New Zealand and advocate for a sustainable tomorrow. Today is also Zonta Rose Day, as Anna mentioned. The yellow rose has been a favourite Zonta symbol for more than 20 years, and as a token of our appreciation, yellow roses are making their way to Tauranga. This morning we are fortunate to have two keynote speakers. Our first keynote this morning is from Sophie Handford, Kāpiti Coast District Councillor. She carries the distinction of being the youngest district councillor elected in a decade and is also known for her climate change activism. In 2019, Sophie founded the School Strike for Climate movement, which mobilised 170,000 people across the country. Please welcome Sophie Handford.
Morena te whānau. Ko wainui tuku maunga, ko wainui tuku awa, no paikakariki ahau, ko Bridget Pidford, tōku mama, ko Peter Handford, tōku papa, ko Sophie Handford, tōku ingoa, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Wow, firstly, I just have to express how grateful and how honoured I am to be a part of this celebration, to be here alongside fellow speakers and all of you online. It really, truly is such an honour to be celebrating this special day with a very special theme also alongside you all. Ko waio, who am I? I aspire to be a life giver. I aspire to be someone who gives life not only to others, but to our collective home, our planet. Who am I? I am someone with a why. My why is that by the end of my life, I want to be able to say and know that I did everything in my power and use my voice to its full potential to speak up for our planet. And the way that that manifests for me is by taking up this role on the Kāpiti Coast District Council, holding the environment, the climate and the youth portfolios, and really trying to make sure that the voice for our next generation is coming through loud and clear so that we know that we can't ignore the needs and the aspirations of our generation that follows. And obviously that part of that is entailing having a livable planet to pass on. I also, as was mentioned, coordinated the School Strike for Climate in 2019 alongside an amazing group of people, and the manifestation of that was 170,000 people out on the streets, standing united again for our collective home and our collective future. So I'm just going to share my screen now, and hopefully you can all see this. I will just press, okay, there we go. Yes, so ko waio, I think I've already kind of taken you through that. Essentially trying to be a life giver, aspiring to be a life giver, aspiring to use my voice to its full potential to speak up for our planet in spaces where obviously our planet cannot physically speak for itself. So the theme of today, gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. I'm going to take us through unpacking that. What does that mean for each of us as individuals, and what does that mean for us as a society to then be invested in a sustainable tomorrow centering gender equality, and how can we make that happen together? So firstly, what is the need for a sustainable tomorrow? Why is a vision of climate justice important? Why did we see 170,000 people out on the streets, 3.5% of our entire population, demanding climate justice from our leaders? Well, I'm going to show you why. So carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, that's a pretty kind of stark reminder that things are changing, that the current levels of carbon dioxide are the highest, obviously, that they've ever been by looking at that graph, and that it's just simply not a natural path that we're headed on, and business as usual is not going to take us towards a future that I think we will feel proud to be passing on. Global surface temperatures, again, a stark reminder of the impacts already globally. We know that if carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere are that high, obviously that'll be having some kind of an impact on the surface temperature, with almost like this blanket being formed around our planet of increased emissions, increased carbon, increased methane, and that is having an impact already on global surface temperatures. We know that too by science that's being produced by bodies like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, who released a report last year, Article 6, essentially saying that this could be code red for humanity. But I think we need to take a slightly different outlook on that. So, what's it going to take? As I mentioned, the IPCC continues releasing reports on the best science, the most up-to-date science that they've also had conversations with communities about. They're socializing this science. So we know that by looking at these graphs too, it's not a good trajectory, and we cannot simply continue to go along that path, because people's lives and livelihoods are at stake right now. We know that too through looking to the Pacific Islands, where in some cases and in some islands such as Tuvalu and Tokelau, the water is already at their doorsteps knocking. With increased global surface temperature, as was shown on the graph, that's having an impact on our global sea level, and causing already people and people with whānau and people with homelands, people with a culture rooted in where they live and rooted in where them and their whānau are from, already having to think about leaving their homelands. But people in the Pacific are saying that they are not drowning, they are fighting. And I think we can take so much inspiration from that. But I would encourage us to ask ourselves, what is it going to take? We know that we're in a climate crisis. We know that the impacts are being felt right now by our brothers and sisters. What's it going to take for us to truly open our eyes and open our hearts and open our minds to both the science, but also to the realities of people on the front lines right now? So yes, things do need to change. We cannot simply continue on those paths of increased emissions, increased carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, and increased global surface temperatures. It's not going to bode well for passing on a world which is livable. And I don't know about you, but I think having the next generation's best interests at heart is so important, because what are we really here for if not to build on the world that we were handed by the generation before us, and to then be giants that the next generation can stand on the shoulders of. So things do need to change, and everything is in our own hands. So we need to ask ourselves the questions: what side of history do we want to be on? And what kind of ancestors do we dream of being? So what is climate justice? If we know why and the reasons for a sustainable tomorrow being needed, and that vision of a sustainable tomorrow, I believe, needs to manifest through a term which is called climate justice. And so what is climate justice? This definition resonates a lot with me, and I'm just going to read it so we can kind of take the key points from it. Climate justice is a term more than a movement that acknowledges climate change can have differing social, economic, public health, and other adverse impacts on underprivileged populations. Climate justice, or advocates for climate justice, are striving to have these inequities addressed head-on through long-term mitigation and adaptation strategies. It's about recognizing that yes, the climate crisis is this huge challenge that we're up against, but actually it provides us with so many opportunities to address the intersectional challenges that also sit alongside climate change. And we'll kind of dive into now how gender equality connects in with all of that. So actually solving climate change, implementing our solutions to climate change, provides us with opportunities to centre the voices of women and the needs and priorities that women have globally. And so it really does provide us and present us with an incredible opportunity. Yes, it can feel overwhelming, and I 100% relate to that and can feel those feelings too, but it does provide us with a really incredible opportunity to address intersectional inequities, but also opportunities. I'd like to briefly spotlight some amazing agents of change here. Brianna Fruin, India Meadow Riley, Lucy Gray, Bronwyn Hayward, Tamitha Paul, Raven Major. We've got Rachel Sanson, Ainganga Lefili, Tapua'i, some amazing young women, but not only young women, standing up for our collective home. And there's very much a network of us all talking and all collaborating to be a part of this movement together for climate justice. So what's possible? We know that we're in the midst of a crisis. We know that things are in our own hands. What is actually possible? Naku te roro, no te roro, ka ora ai te iwi. With your basket and with mine, the people will thrive. We have to really dig deep and think about what we value as a society, as a collective, as a rōpū, as organisations, as businesses, and how do we act upon that to then create an Aotearoa we can feel proud to pass on. When we think about what the climate crisis puts at stake, those global surface temperatures increasing, that literally puts at stake our entire collective home, you know, our wildlife, the creatures that we share this planet with, our thriving nature. I don't know about you, but I feel far more excited and energized about being part of a society that's creating something like this, something that looks different. And a sustainable tomorrow could look like quite literally anything we dream up, because with the power that even exists in all of you tuning in today, it's possible to create things like this. There are so many intersectional opportunities. We can address the need to create more connected, resilient communities, to care for communities and care for the planet, and to centre kindness through all of this too. A vision of climate justice too looks like taking learnings and building on learnings and centering learnings that Indigenous peoples have in their foundational knowledge and understanding of how they view the world. And so that can really be kind of seen as a guiding light and a shining light to guide us through these next few years as well, because it's extremely important that we start to implement and action things like this now, and it's totally within our power to do that. But let's dream big. Let's think blue sky. Let's get creative. Let's not think within constraints, because, you know, we're in this crisis and it's not going to be the same things that we've done time and time again that get us out of it. We know that we need to think differently, we need to act differently, and we need to open our hearts and our minds and our eyes differently to both realize the potential, but also, as mentioned, to see the realities too. So how would gender equality today contribute to this vision? Well, gender equality is a central element of climate justice. If you haven't read the book there on the left, Drawdown, an amazing comprehensive plan to reverse global warming, to tackle the climate crisis. And the writer of Drawdown explains that if we gain ground on gender equity, we gain ground on global warming. The former executive secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change also said climate change above all is a justice issue. It's a social justice issue, it's a gender issue. So as mentioned, all of those intersections that help play into the climate crisis continuing to be worsened can then be seen as opportunities to solve through our solutions to the climate crisis. So I know I don't have much more time, but before I pass over to our incredible next speaker, Ranjna, I would just like to kind of give some whakaaro as to how we could make this happen. So through creating a vision of climate justice, these are some of the things in the gender equity space that I believe would really enhance our creation of a sustainable tomorrow together. So you can just have a brief look at these, but yeah, creating space for a diversity of voices to be heard. We need to purposefully and intentionally shift the existing levers of power and inequities at play to fully and sustainably address the climate crisis. Invest in women leaders and activists at the forefront of the climate justice movement, and invest in knowledge and lived experience held within your rōpū. Invest in young women and girls to ensure they have the capacity and the confidence to participate and help inform responses to both mitigating and adapting to climate change. We need to collectively continue to provide our leaders with the mandate to go further and faster, centering climate justice and an emphasis on justice. The School Strike for Climate very much arrived on the doorsteps of Parliament and said we're demanding climate justice, and there was a reason why we used that term justice. We also need to continue to be the change that we want to see in the world. So a final question that I will leave you with: what kind of ancestor do you dream of being? Change starts here, and it starts now. So if we know we're in the midst of a climate crisis, and hopefully I was able to provide you with that understanding if you didn't already have that, we have the solutions in our own hands. So it's time to bring them to life through centering, uplifting, and empowering the voices of women and girls who will be kind of most vulnerable to the impacts, but who also have so much of the energy, the ideas, and the whole kind of mana that we need to respond to this in a sustainable and full way. So what kind of ancestor do you dream of being? Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Ngā mihi nui ki a koe, Sophie. Thank you for those thought-provoking questions, for sharing your why, your role as a life giver, and your passion for protecting this one planet that we share. As a sign of appreciation for speaking today and all the work you do to stand for climate justice and amplify the voices of other warriors speaking into this space, Zonta Yellow Roses are making their way to you. A reminder to those joining us online, if you've been inspired by the words of wisdom from our speakers, and if, like me, you're feeling compelled to take action to protect our environment, to think and act differently and empower women around you, then please share your thoughts with the hashtags that you see on screen here. It is my pleasure to introduce our next keynote speaker for today, Ranjna Patel, ONZM QSM, who is the founder and director of Tāmaki Health, New Zealand's largest independent primary healthcare provider. She is also the founder of Gandhi Nivas, a family violence prevention program which provides services for individuals at risk of committing harm in the home. In 2020, Ranjna received the Community Hero Award at the New Zealand Women of Influence Awards, and in 2021, she was awarded the Trade Me New Zealand Innovator of the Year Award. Please welcome Ranjna Patel. Sorry, we just seem to be having trouble hearing you, Ranjna. Would you mind unmuting yourself?
Oh, you didn't hear anything?
Sorry, please start again.
Ina mana, ina ria, ina karanga tanga maha, ina katoa. Morena and namaste. Happy International Women's Day to everyone. Thank you, Anna from Zonta and Tara from UN Women for giving me the honor to speak on International Women's Day. Thank you, Joy and Helen, for asking me and the words of encouragement. Sophie, for giving us a solution when everybody thinks it's always too hard to tackle climate change. I would like to start with the words my granddaughter used in her closing speech for year 13 as a senior prefect at St. Kentigern College when she addressed the school. Coco Chanel once said, in order to be irreplaceable, one must always be different. So I encourage you all to love who you are, honor and appreciate your uniqueness, and celebrate where you come from, as you cannot change who came before you, but you can influence where you go. This year, in the 2 months, we have seen our world disrupted. A range of environmental floods in Brazil, Iran, Madagascar, heavy snowfalls in Turkey, Pakistan, and US, wildfires in Spain and Argentina, and the volcanic eruptions in Ecuador and Tonga. Australia seeing floods they have never seen before. All of this is a result of the imbalance of the climate of our planet. Then we have Syria, Afghanistan, and Ukraine, the imbalance of the climate of power. And in these situations, in the aftermath, the impact on women and children will be there for generations to come. We are in a destructive era, and we needed to change it to a constructive era. As women, the same imbalance we have faced in everything we do. Being a woman of colour, and it doesn't matter that my family has been here for over 100 years, I face double bias. I walk into a room and I am fresh off the boat. I go to India, and as soon as I open my mouth, I am a foreigner. So where do I belong? So I decided this gives me the license to do things differently. I'm already judged, so why not use that? So my different way of thinking is being accepted and laughed at. In 2020, National Council of Women of New Zealand surveyed 1,200 people and found 80% of New Zealanders agreed that gender equality is a fundamental right. And yet, the lowest ratings were in senior management, welfare, advertising, and business. When you look at those categories, women are the main consumers and yet have very little input at senior levels. Unless we get the diversity of thought at senior level, we are going to be doing what we've always done and wonder why we are not getting a different result. Research shows that the wage gap with ethnic Pacific and Māori women is much more than racial groups from South Africa, North America, UK, and European countries. How do we break the bias? You either have a victim mindset or a survivor mindset. You have to embrace change for a sustainable tomorrow. We have to change the climate of the environment and power in which we work and live for the future of the girls that follow us. With 6 granddaughters, I want them to have courage to be able to see people that look like them succeed. You have to turn obstacles into opportunities. A little story about myself. I had an arranged marriage at 18 to a doctor. I went to India on the 27th of November, met my husband on the 30th of November, and married him on the 8th of December, 48 years ago. In the hospital system, because he had an accent, he was treated very differently, which came as a shock to me. But together, we started a business in Aotearoa because a wise mentor told my husband, New Zealand isn't ready for a coloured specialist with an accent. So go and work in an area like you that sounds like you and looks like you. That in those days was either Ponsonby or Aotearoa. He knew it was going to be too hard to break the bias. As a migrant, you need to survive, the hunger to survive and succeed. We turned our professions on its head. Back in the 70s, we dared to have walk-in clinics, open longer hours and lower the fees. We were disrupting our profession. Our population had a priority of putting food on the table, and health became secondary. So we needed to increase access. We adapted the how and the what. We grew the patient base, and so we were considered by our peers as being dodgy. The profession puts restrictions on who and what we could do. Obstacles were put in place, so we could not survive. So we created opportunities from those obstacles. We hired locums, which made us grow even more. And today we have the largest primary healthcare organization. We have 4 generations of patients coming through the door, and 60% of the patients in South Auckland are Pacific and Māori, belong to our practices. And we managed to close the equity gap with Pacific and Māori in health by just being patient-focused and our diversity of thought. The wise words of Mahatma Gandhi: first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. This has been my pathway in most things. This is how I have chosen to break the bias. We could have had a victim mentality, but we turned it into opportunities. There are always 2 ways of looking at things and problems. And if you embrace change, you will find a solution. You can be standing on one side of a 6 or the opposite side and see a 9. You're both right in saying it's a 6 and a 9, but it's a different way of thinking. As Mother Teresa says, we often feel that what we are doing is just a drop in the ocean, but the ocean would be less because that drop is missing. There are 2 mindsets, either fixed or growth. As women, we have the ability to cross both very quickly. We are mothers, grandmothers, children, aunts, sisters, and we traverse the landscape with ease. With a fixed mindset, we keep doing what we've always done and then expect different results. Because we are working harder, it doesn't necessarily follow. But with a growth mindset, look at what if, maybe if I try it this way, reframe your mind. I have the privilege to sit on several advisory boards, and one is New Zealand Police. In 2014, we were presented with some data. New Zealand's biggest shame: 1 in 3 women faces family violence. Every 4 minutes, police are called to a family harm incident, and yet they believe only 20% of women ask for help. And then we were presented that 4 out of 14 that year, women killed were Indian. That's 29% when our population was at 3%. The area commander asked for advice from the advisory board. And like most of us would say today, not me, not my family, not my community. And he challenged us. Data does not lie. Not having any experience in this arena, I went to MIT and did a family violence course to try and understand the problem. We gather all the providers in the area to hear what they had to say: Women's Refuge, Pacific and Māori providers, ethnic providers, men's services, children's services, 20 providers in the room. When you are looking for solutions, listen. Listen to what is being said with an open mind. Everyone was passionate about what they were doing, and each organisation was doing their little bit. But there seemed to be big gaps from what I could see. Police had introduced the police safety orders, which can remove the man from the home so the women and children can stay home, less disruptive and a lot less mental health issues. But often there was nowhere for the men to go. I heard majority of the women take the men back, over 90%. But unless they were changed, and they cannot get help, counselling, anger management, or any kind of support unless they are being charged. So I asked what was needed: bricks and mortar, so they don't have to sleep in the car, usually with a bottle of alcohol. It seemed to me easy. Work with the root cause of family harm, the men. But the abuse I faced, because why was I working with the men, the scum of the earth, the perpetrators, when we should be supporting the victims? Reality was women took the men back with no changed behaviour or tools to deal with the next time. It was only going to escalate the next time when an incident happens. Women wanted to be safe. They just wanted the violence to stop, and they wanted their partner back. In December 2014, we opened the first home, Gandhi Nivas. Gandhi, man of peace, and Nivas, home. Our point of difference was it was 24/7. Now that was challenging the norm in our society. Most services were open Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Most incidents happened Thursday night, Friday nights, and weekends. A complete mismatch of services. What we had was qualified staff 24/7, because you sometimes get one chance to make a difference. And above all, free counselling, unlimited free counselling. And we address the whole whānau. Once again, look at the root cause. The environment will remain the same if we do not help to change what the real issue is. Women have the say when that man can come back home, because change behaviour doesn't happen because the package of care has finished. Traditional government thinking, one size fits all. By enabling behavioural, environmental, family change, we saw that 60% of men did not re-offend over a 5-year period. Internationally unheard of. But it's a diversity of thought that was challenged and questioned. And even if recognised, the research by Massey University, it was still challenged. My success in this program will be when more than 20% of women pick up the phone to ask for help. We have to break the bias. We cannot remain victims. We need to be in a survivor mindset and a growth mindset. As the minister says, change intergenerational is our biggest challenge. Our psychiatrist on our governing board says it is going to take 3 generations for girls to not think a little bit of hitting is okay because mum didn't say anything when dad did it. And the boy to think, oh, dad did it and mum didn't say anything. It's going to take 3 generations to take out the normal behaviour. And we need it at the primary intervention, not the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. We have to remember that if we fail, it doesn't make us a failure. It makes us stronger. Our diversity of thought is our greatest strength. Back in 92, when the book Men from Mars and Women Are from Venus came out, it did cause food for thought. They laughed at John Gray, but it did get highlighted that we do have and need diversity of thought. So in the end, we did break the bias. I have had the good fortune of working with some incredible men who didn't have a bias. My husband, who at the start of the business said, I do the clinical, you do the rest. HR, accounting, cleaning, typing, whatever needed to do to get the business off the ground. My son, who stepped in when we needed corporate structures and followed my lead in community values. Our CE from my primary health care organisation, who would listen to all my crazy ways of delivering medical services in a high needs area. I would talk, scribble on an A4 what the problem was, what needed to be done, and how we do it, and what reporting was needed. He would write it up in a business plan, and off we go. Those men help break the bias, and they will see the benefit of gender equality and making it a sustainable tomorrow from their actions. I leave you with some words that resonate with me. I am a great one for words of affirmation. Might be the imposter syndrome we all face, as I did when I was asked to speak today. If this Indian girl with no formal qualifications gained all her business acumen in a fruit shop, started a medical practice in Aotearoa and grew it to the largest general practice in New Zealand, anything is possible. If I could tackle an issue that is the shame of New Zealand, family harm, and have incredible results, your diversity of thought works. In the words of Dalai Lama, If you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ranjna, for sharing your insights on the era we find ourselves in and what we can do to bring about constructive change. Thank you for highlighting the importance of breaking the bias and embracing change for a sustainable tomorrow, and for underlining the value in listening when we are looking for solutions. As a sign of our gratitude and support of the work that you are doing to help families in need, a donation has been made to Gandhi Nivas. I would now like to invite Tara Singh, President of UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand, to say some words to close our event.
Thank you so much, Tupe. I'm Tara Singh, and I am the President of UN Women New Zealand. UN Women is the United Nations organization delivering programs, policies, and standards that uphold women's human rights and ensure that every woman and every girl are able to live up to their full potential. UN Women is the global champion for gender equality, and UN Women New Zealand is UN Women's partner on the ground here in Aotearoa. The United Nations recognized 1975 as International Women's Year and began celebrating March 8th as International Women's Day. 47 years later, here we are today, celebrating together at the annual New Zealand International Women's Day breakfast, co-hosted by Zonta Club of Wellington. What a fantastic program we've had. I'm so thrilled with the breadth of wisdom and diversity that this truly International Women's Day celebration brings. The first Wahine Maori Governor General, representation from influential Pakeha, Pasifika, Asian allies, all speaking together, all celebrating together as one united sisterhood, just as was envisioned those 40 odd years ago at the first International Women's Day. I was just informed that over 500 people and organizations are convening right now around the country with us today. I'd like to do a shout out to the UN Women Auckland Regional Committee who are tuning in and who have an exciting follow-up program with esteemed guest speakers to continue and build upon this important mahi today. And also to women leaders like yourself who are tuning in live from every corner of New Zealand and around the world. UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand thanks you for your commitment to women and girls, and we celebrate you today. Without you, UN Women would not be able to do the extraordinary work that we lead around the world. It is both an honor and with a heavy heart that I leave you, our most precious community leaders, with a message that I was asked to share with you from UN Women in New York about the situation in Ukraine. Since 2015, UN Women has been scaling up its presence and program in the Ukraine and opened its first dedicated office in the Ukraine that year. UN Women will remain in Ukraine and are committed to supporting the Ukrainian people, especially its women and girls. UN Women Executive Director Sima Bajos said, UN Women is gravely concerned at the intensification of the military offensive in Ukraine, and particular attention needs to be drawn to the consequences on the lives and the livelihoods of Ukraine's women and girls. The UN Secretary General has called for an immediate ceasefire, a de-escalation of tensions, and a firm return to diplomacy and dialogue. Both diplomacy and dialogue to me sound like something that come very natural to us as women. UN Women is committed to keeping women and girls at the center of the humanitarian assistance in Ukraine and urges us, New Zealand, Aotearoa, to unite in support of a strong gender responsiveness assistance during this time of need. To inform yourself further and keep up to date with the situation on the ground in Ukraine and other areas of conflict and crisis affecting women and girls around the world, you may go to unwomen.org.nz. There was a report issued by the World Economic Forum that estimates that it will take an average of 135 years for women and men to reach parity on a range of factors worldwide. This estimate replaces the 99 years outlined in the 2020 report, marking a 36-year setback, the largest gain in 1 year since the report became in 2006. The COVID pandemic has clearly negatively impacted women and girls disproportionately in every measurable area, from women's economic participation and marked increases in gender-based violence. But New Zealand, along with Nordic countries, Iceland, Finland, Norway, and also Sweden, topped the list as the most gender equal countries in the world. We still have so much progress to make, but Aotearoa is leading the world, and the world is watching our every move. This is in large part to the daily efforts and dedication, which do not come easy, of the many individuals and organizations who are tuning in today. So on behalf of UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand, I thank you for participating in the 2022 International Women's Day Celebration Breakfast. We thank you for your commitment, your compassion turned to action, and your solidarity. There is a time to inform and gather, to stand together as women and he for she champions for our environment and for humanity, embracing continually better ideas that benefit everyone and lead to a brighter future for all. This is our time, and the time is now. You are the change makers, and we celebrate you today and every day. From the bottom of my heart and the team of dedicated staff and volunteers at UN Women New Zealand, Zonta Club of Wellington, Zonta New Zealand Leadership, and Zonta President Anna Jackson, our dynamic and utterly charming MC Tupe, Belinda for leading the karakia, the amazing 2022 IWD Planning and Governance Committee, and of course, our extraordinary keynote speakers, Her Excellency Dame Cindy Kiro, the Honorable Jan Tinetti, Ms. Ranjna Patel, Ms. Sophie Handford. Your messages have inspired us. I hope that you each will take a moment during your day today to pass on the inspiration that we have all been gifted today. As you go to work, care for your children or the children of others, dedicate time to your community or family, to wish women and girls that you meet a very happy International Women's Day 2022. Thank you.
Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. All of our speakers have painted a realistic picture of the collective challenges we are facing as women, from the impacts of climate change, the pandemic, domestic violence, and the situation in Ukraine. We hope that you leave with some insights from the powerful messages we have heard and renewed energy to do what you can to bring about equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. I now have the pleasure of closing our event in the Pacific way in my heritage language of Samoan. I will now give thanks that our gathering has concluded well and to ask for blessings on each and every one of us throughout our movements today. Tātou tatalo. Lo matou tamae o ilelangi. Whawhatai o I umale manuia. La matou mafutanga nei. Whaamanuia mai a te I matou ta I tuatasi. Ia tumaupea le anganga pa ia. I lunga o a matou la asanga uma. I lo suafa pa ia. Amene. Thank you very much for joining us today. Enjoy your day and keep safe and well.
Well done, Tupe.
Thank you, everyone. Great. So we finished the live stream now?